Little Putin has been watching the turrets of his tanks popping off like fireworks and his APCs disintegrating with alarming regularity, but it hasn't all been one-way traffic, with the gallant Ukrainians taking their fair share of losses. Like with personnel casualty lists, there has been a lot of uncertainty as to what is right and what is wrong on the numbers of lost machinery during the invasion of Ukraine. But before we start and to put things into perspective, it is estimated that Russia lost 83,500 tanks of various sizes during World War II. Now that is a seriously impressive number and obviously included all manner or replacements and was roughly over a 5-year period. They would then lose a more conservative number during their time in Afghanistan, 134 tanks and 1314 infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. Obviously, this war was not a conventional one and the losses were lower due to the unusual use requirements for that theater. The most widely used source for estimating the critical data point of Russian equipment losses in Ukraine since February 24 is the website-based Oryx, who claim that Russia has so far lost 1,407 tanks. According to Oryx, since the invasion, Russia's total heavy equipment losses, excluding tanks, include 1,602 infantry fighting vehicles, 245 armored personnel carriers, 40 MRAP vehicles, 159 infantry mobility vehicles, 181 command posts and communication stations, 235 engineering vehicles and equipment, 73 artillery support vehicles and equipment, 120 towed artillery pieces, 250 self-propelled artillery pieces, 144 multiple rocket launchers, 20 self-propelled anti-aircraft guns and 78 surface-to-surface anti-aircraft systems. Let's not forget the 1898 trucks, vehicles, and jeeps. Whilst not directly fighting machines, these losses will put a brake on logistics support and the negative effects that brings. Other sources, for instance the Pentagon or British intelligence, are a bit more conservative, estimating losses generally 20 to 30% less than Oryx. Unlike the British and US governments, Oryx has clearly stated its methodology. It includes in its counts only heavy weapons someone took a picture of, and happened to post in an open information resource an Oryx researcher could spot. A Russian tank gets counted as eliminated only when researchers see compelling evidence. After checking the type and doing due diligence for faked information and duplication, Oryx records the loss. The Oryx team emphasizes its published loss estimates are going to be on the low end, because they are counting only destroyed heavy weapons someone took a picture of and happened to post on the internet, rather than every single tank, infantry fighting vehicle, artillery piece and anti-aircraft system the Ukrainians have managed to take out and not photographed. Kremlin officials have claimed they started the Ukraine war with more than 2,800 battle-ready tanks in combat formations, and another 10,000 in reserve. They have claimed to have deep reserves of other key equipment like infantry fighting vehicles. News reports from both outside and inside Russia, however, have suggested those claims were heavily overstated, as was to be expected. For example, in March, a senior officer in Russia's 13th Tank Brigade committed suicide after learning that the reserve tanks of the unit were in UN serviceable condition, and in some cases stripped to the hulls of critical parts. The rail movement of a battalion of obsolete Russian T-62 tanks into the Zaporizhia sector has everyone thinking that they have run through their storage of modern models and are already having to tap into the older stock. The use of the T-62, which was designed in the 1950s and produced from the early 60s, is a classic example of one of two scenarios. One, the Russians have no more tanks left and are relying on museum pieces to see off the Ukrainians. Two, the Russians have new tanks but would rather use the cheaper old ones as they don't care about the well-being of their troops, and are relying on quantity over quality. The Pentagon believes that as many as 90% of the tanks held in reserve by Russia are in fact so rusted and stripped of spares that they are useless. On August 8, U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Colin Cole, told reporters that Washington estimates Russia has lost at least 4,000 armored vehicles, particularly from hits by first-line anti-tank guided missiles like the US-manufactured Javelin and the UK-manufactured NLAW. Both are modern fire-and-forget weapons that target a tank's roof, where the armor is thinnest. Just for interest's sake, the US has provided 7,000 Javelins to the Ukrainians. the United Kingdom has sent 5,000 Nors. But these don't represent the only anti-tank weaponry. Other countries have donated systems like Milan and Carl Gustaf, to mention but a few. We at Dark Histories, we believe the total number of tanks is closer to 2,200 damaged, destroyed and captured, with the other machinery being closer to 20% more overall. There is simply no way that each machine that is hit gets photographed and confirmed. In terms of the Ukrainians, their casualties haven't been as widely reported on but are still super important to understand. So far, Oryx is reporting a total of 332 tanks lost. That is considerably smaller than the Russians, but let's not forget that Ukraine had a lot less in stock than the Russians, and they have also adopted strikingly different approaches to using the machines. They have also lost 179 armored fighting vehicles, 331 infantry fighting vehicles, 177 armored personnel carriers, 20 MRAP vehicles, 199 infantry mobility vehicles, 31 engineering vehicles, 20 self-propelled anti-tank missile systems, 18 artillery support vehicles, 69 self-propelled artillery pieces. So, the Ukrainians have not been without loss, but what has been extraordinary has been their ability to put ex-Russian machinery back into the fight, to such an extent that Russia has become their #1 supplier of heavy armored machinery for the war effort. In conclusion, we cannot see how these losses are sustainable for the Russians. They will need to look abroad or significantly ramp up their tank and armored vehicle production in order to stay in this fight. I fear that a reckoning is coming when the Russians realize they have no further legroom and need to act to save face. Ukraine will need to continue the support from the international donors and to remain diligent in the use of their armor. Either way, we can expect the losses to continue. Thank you for watching. Please do share your thoughts and leave a comment.